What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Listography. I'm Joe. I'm joined, as always, by Jason and Kramzer, and today we are doing 1978. So what happened in 1978? Well, we're still kind of in the midst of the disco craze. 1977 saw Saturday Night Fever, and that pretty much is still dominating the charts. You had Star Wars in 77, so 78 is kind of like that awkward transition year, kind of getting closer to the 80s, still in the 70s. The big thing in 78, it's a pop culture phenomenon, and that is Grease came out in 78, which was massive. It was all over the charts. Frankie Valli on the title track. You had Olivia Newton-John. It was huge. It was pretty much, between that and disco, that pretty much took over the music world for 78. What else did we have in 78? We had the death of Keith Moon, which was terrible. That sucked for everybody. Terry Kath, guitarist for Chicago, accidentally shot himself. Sandy Denny also died. And the final show for the Sex Pistols, who thankfully broke up after their ill-fated American tour. I saw that face, Kramzer. No, I do not like the Sex Pistols in any way. And you had some really great debuts in 78, which I'm sure we will get into more as we go through our albums lists, because this is a reshoot of 1978. So some of the reactions might be a little canned because we already know what's happened. Why don't we just get into it?
All right, 1978. I don't know, probably for me, one of the weaker years of the 70s. Still a strong year, but maybe we've been a bit spoiled for the past 8 years or so. But I had 7 in serious contention. The 2 that aren't making my list are Heaven Tonight by Cheap Trick and Street Legal by Bob Dylan. My runners-up are going to be The Hermit of Mink Hollow by Todd Rundgren. I'm a huge Todd fan. He made several of my lists early in the 70s. He's been missing for a few years. He's been putting out great music. During that time, he was absent from my list, doing a lot of sort of prog and more experimental things. Here, he returns to simpler pop song structures, and with that also returns to my list. I've also got this year's Model from Elvis Costello, his excellent sophomore album. I've got the debut from the Cars, one of the great debut records of all time, full of hits. Then I've also got a pair of records that are probably, less obvious choices, things that you don't see come up often when people talk about 78, but records that I still think are great. I've got But Seriously Folks by Joe Walsh, which is sort of almost yacht rock kind of LA record, but mixed up with his sort of twisted humor. There's great playing on it. The songs are really good. It's probably best known for Life's Been Good, but fortunately that track comes last on the record, so it doesn't really get in the way of the other tracks. It doesn't really fit in with the rest of the record, so it's sequenced well and a really good record. But my number one favorite record of 1978 is going to be Excitable Boy by Warren Zevon.
In their dealings with addressed envelope to Davis and Kirk.
I think Warren Zevon's a tremendously underrated singer-songwriter. When I picked Late for the Sky in 74, I said that was sort of the pinnacle of the sort of LA singer-songwriter Laurel Canyon type of thing. Warren Zevon is related to that sort of geographically, and he sort of runs in the same circles of musicians. But I think of him differently than like a Jackson Browne. His humor and the way he writes is very different. His songs are a lot darker. This is his best-selling record, I believe. It has his big hits on it: Werewolves of London, Lawyers, Guns, and Money. But start to finish, every song on this is really good. Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner, Accidentally Like a Martyr, Tenderness on the Block, the title track, just tons of really, really good songs. Yeah, it won pretty easily for me, actually. So that's my picks for 78.
I hate Life's Been Good to Me by Joe Walsh. Just want the world to know that. All right, so 78 for me was really competitive. I've had about 3 or 4 different albums that I considered for the winner. And I had even more considered for the top 5. So just a few that I couldn't fit in. Be Third by Big Star, Kick Inside by Kate Bush, Hemispheres by Rush, Chairs Missing by Wire, Springsteen's Darkness on the Edge of Town, couldn't get that in. Blondie had a good record. But here are the ones that did make my runners up. I've got More Songs About Buildings and Food by Talking Heads, Jesus of Cool by Nick Lowe, Stranger in Town by Bob Seger, and then this year's Model by Elvis Costello. Really tricky for me to pick the winner, and the reason why the winner won is basically just because of the longevity of it, of my relationship to the album, having liked it far longer than any of these other ones. And even though it's kind of like a huge, almost greatest hits album, I never get sick of any of that. And that album is going to be The Cars by The Cars.
In their dealings with addressed envelope to Davis and Kurt.
Like I said, plays like a greatest hits album. Pretty much every song on it, I'd say, except maybe I'm in Touch with Your World, you will hear on the radio. You've got Moving in Stereo, All Mixed Up, Bye Bye Love, You're All That I've Got Tonight, Good Times Roll, My Best Friend's Girl, Just What I Needed. I mean, one of the greatest debuts of all time, and really kind of a nice, refreshing take on rock and roll, but also fitting the mold of what's going on around it with kind of a new wave sound. It's got a blend of 50-ish revival, art rock, radio play tunes, hard rock, soloing. The guitar work on My Best Friend's Girl is fantastic. A lot of different kind of tonal differences, and the sonic nature isn't incredibly different all over the album, but there's just a little bit of nuance and variety from song to song with the guitar that makes it awesome. It's got, you know, the vibe of the album is so cool. It's kind of just lovesick, vulnerable, hopeless romantic type where, you know, Ocasek's kind of complaining, but he doesn't care, and he's just got this cool, like, confident, cold attitude, but with like this bright frosting on it, where really trying to fit in and be cool and be part of the cool crowd. And because the talent is there, he is. And it's just a tremendous album all the way through. There is no downplay or, you know, there's no downward spiral, there's no filler. It's fantastic. It's short and sweet to the point. And, you know, I like all the other albums I mentioned, but like I said, just the longevity of how good this is. And really, when you just look at the track listing and know that all of these are radio hits, it's just so impressive for a debut to, you know, pretty much go, 7 for 8 or 8 for 9 out of, this gets regular rock radio play now. So I don't know if it's my favorite Cars record. I can't wait to do that list, but it is just awesome and just edges out. Probably Stranger in Town, Bob Seger would have been my silver medal, but this one edges it out just a little bit. So The Cars by The Cars.
A great choice also on my list. There's a bunch of good albums that didn't quite make my top 5. Some Girls by the Rolling Stones, The Police's debut, Outlandish to More, Queen, Jazz, even Infinity by Journey was in the running. I think it's their best album. I kind of like the way the 2 lead singers it's not all Steve Perry. It's kind of a cool dynamic, but didn't quite make the list. And in full disclosure, I actually am changing up my list slightly from when we first recorded this and dropping Bruce Springsteen's Darkness on the Edge of Town from my top runners-up, and I will reveal the one that replaced it shortly. But my other runners-up, I have this year's Model by Elvis Costello, very raw and punky, and kind of a nice transition between his debut and kind of the more mature sound he'd start to develop. Made all 3 lists. Very nice. For Elvis there. I'm sure he's very happy to hear that. Also have The Cars, self-titled, just like Kramzer said. It's a if you put that out as a greatest hits album, people probably would be just like, oh yeah, that's all their hits. There they are. I also have, and this is kind of a weird one, Hear My Dear by Marvin Gaye. It's just such a train wreck of an album. It's almost uncomfortable to listen to. It's like one of those, it's like watching a movie that's like technically really great, but just really kind of hard to watch. It just really goes in detail about his divorce with the sister of Berry Gordy, who was the head of Motown at the time. So it's just really weird. He's singing about like taxes and alimony and against this kind of like real funky, sparse beat. It's a really cool album, but it's also kind of hard to listen to. Okay, so the one that replaced Darkness on the Edge of Town is going to be Kate Bush's The Kick Inside, which apparently I'm late to the Kate Bush party because I've basically been listening to it nonstop over the past 3 days or so. And I'm now in love with Kate Bush and slightly obsessed, so that was kind of cool. Wuthering Heights is just a phenomenal song. I can't get enough of it. And her in general is she's so cool. So that's going to be something I'll be exploring here It's kind of always fun to find like a new artist that you immediately connect with, and she's one. And probably eventually that album will be my top of this year, but for now, I can't change it. I got Van Halen 1, the debut.
In their dealings with addressed envelope to Davis and Kurt.
Eddie Van Halen totally changing the game with his just ferocious, outlandish guitar. David Lee Roth sounds like nothing else in rock music. Just a really unique kind of combination. In this album, you know, they get a little slicker, Van Halen and Van Hagar later, but you know, this sound is kind of dirty and raw, almost punkish. The hits are great. You talk about Love, Jamie's Crying, but pretty much the whole album works. Atomic Punk, I'm the One. You know, there's no weak tracks. The guitar playing is always excellent. Just has a nice kind of raw punk attitude that they never really got again. It's very kind of unique in their catalog, but it's kind of the perfect balance between, you know, the guitar heroics of Eddie and sort of the, you know, it's hard to describe David Lee Roth, but you all know what he sounds like. It's sort of, you know, so on something like Ice Cream Man, you know, it's kind of this laid back, loose party kind of vibe, but the guitars are just, you know, incredible. Great drumming from Alex Van Halen. Kramzer hates Alex Van Halen, but I like him, and I think he's very good on this album. So that's it. That's 1978, probably the weakest year in the 70s, but tons of great debuts, and you know, it's still the 70s, so it's still great. You know, we're going to be pining for these days when we're in the later halves of the 80s, early 90s. Well, I will be, and I think Jason will be too.
I don't know.
Maybe
I won't be pining. I've got a lot of my personal favorite artists and classic albums. I'm gonna be fine. I am worried about you guys, but actually Jason might just be like, I'm done with music. Like I don't want to listen to it again.
it's gonna be a walkout.
There's stuff I like in every single year. I'll be able to come up with 5, but I might not have. The years definitely aren't as deep. I won't have like tons and tons to pick from.
Fair enough. Well, that was 1978. Give us a like if you like the video. Leave your top 5, your runners up in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and join us again for 1979, the final year of the 70s. Very sad. Next week. Thanks for watching.